Hi everyone, welcome to Aurelia's virtual book club. I'm discussing Black River Redemption today by Jess Eise. So we had an awesome interview with her last time at the beginning of the month. I've been moving around a lot, so time is weird to me this month. I really liked this book. I read it on the plane from Indiana to Oakland, and it was the perfect book for that. Lots of fun and adventures, and obviously there's a plane in that too, so it was kind of fun to be reading about someone going on a flight and having bad things happen that were not related to the flight going bad while I was on an airplane. When I was first thinking about this book, I was getting the vibe from it that it would be a little bit like The Heart of Darkness. I don't know, maybe it's the Black River part, I think. But it's not, it does deal with similar themes, right? Like there's the Amerindians and the issues of health and cleanliness and like having access to good health care, and cross-cultural miscommunication. But there's also, Heart of Darkness is very dark and very heavy in a certain way, like emotionally very distressing in a certain way. Whereas I found Black River Redemption to be a much lighter read. So it was a way, I really enjoyed it because it was a way to examine some of those same issues without having to go to that really dark place emotionally that a lot of things sometimes make you go. Like you don't always want to feel like you're a hopeless human being because you're not doing all of these big, huge things to change the world. It's nice sometimes to read about something and have some fun reading about it and be like, oh, well, maybe there's some little thing I can do to help change the world. So I enjoyed that. Yeah. What else? So much else. I really identified a lot with Lizzie because I love traveling and I go everywhere all by myself. Luckily for me, I haven't had anything bad happen to me yet, knock on wood. But I really like exploring new places and doing things that I wouldn't necessarily think to do until it's there and it's in the moment and it makes sense. So and this is even true like at home, right? So I'm from California originally. One of my uncles lives in San Jose, and I've been visiting him for like my whole life, but I've never been anywhere there except his house. So I was going to a conference this past week, and I decided to walk from my uncle's house to the conference instead of taking public transportation, because that way I could get a little bit of a chance to explore the city some on my way to and from there. And that was a lot of fun, and that's sort of the same kind of adventurous spirit that Lizzie has. But I also identified with her because she's had something bad happen to her before. And I think all of us have, right? Like my bad thing that's like really big would have been how frustrating and difficult my PhD was, or trying to do the PhD. I obviously didn't, I left because it was so bad. But identifying with that and wanting to figure out ways of confronting that fear and moving past it so that you don't feel crippled by it. Like I understand that. I want to continue doing the research that I had planned to do in the context of a PhD outside of that. So I don't want the fact that I had a bad experience to make it impossible for me to make something that could have so much potential benefit to people. In the same way that I think Lizzie doesn't want to let her bad experience previously keep her from helping the people in Guyana with the issues of malaria and all surrounding that. And I really liked how serendipitous it all was. So she has this experience where she ends up on the plane, and the plane lands to do what's supposed to be a routine fuel drop at a mine, and it's been taken over by enemy forces who think she's a spy, because obviously all Americans traveling abroad must, by definition, or that's the perspective of these particular rebels anyway, not necessarily the perspective of every person ever, obviously. but they refuse to believe that she might just be a tourist or someone there to be helpful. And so she has to leave, because otherwise they're going to torture her and rape her. And there was a very good use of foreshadowing, I thought, with in the very beginning in the prologue, where the captain is abusing this prostitute who has dyed her hair to look blonde and blue-eyed and all of that. And he has a very particular type of person that he wants to take advantage of, because he is a very anti-American person. And it's clear as you're reading it, we know that the captain wants to do the same thing to Lizzie that he did to that unfortunate prostitute before. And we know that she has to escape. So we're rooting for her. And she succeeds in escaping. But then she gets stuck in this situation where she has to act on what she came to Guyana to do, but she hasn't had any time to put anything in place. She doesn't have any contacts. She doesn't have any real in-depth cultural understanding of the relationship between the politicians and the bureaucracy and the healthcare structure and the rural Amerindians who need the help. So she has nothing except the clothes on her back. She's just escaped from a potentially life-threatening situation, and she has to try and save this kid's life. And I think that really, that experience not only helps her understand the connection, but because of everyone else with Steve and the others trying to find her, they ended up creating a lot of publicity, a lot of noise around the whole issue, so that when she finally arrives, it makes a difference. It makes an impact, because people are already talking about her. So when she shows up being like, we need to save this boy, that message comes across loud and clear, because people are already listening. And I think we can learn a lot from that. Whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish, whether we're trying to inspire people to make little changes to become the best versions of themselves, or whether we're trying to start an organization to go and do things the same way that Lizzie is trying to do, with bridging the gaps in healthcare and emerging cultures. So it's useful for us to learn, when people are already listening, the message spreads faster and has a bigger impact, and more is accomplished. So how do we get people to listen? How do we encourage and inspire people to start listening without having to use something tragic or horrific? I think in a lot of ways, especially with the news, we are very much inundated with bad news. There's, a politician is been exposed as a fraud, or someone has committed an act of terrorism, or someone has tried to start a war, or someone has succeeded in starting a war, or someone's killed a bunch of hostages, or the economy is going down. That's what's in the headlines all the time, every day. So how do we encourage people to be paying attention to things that could become huge negative issues like those headlines before it gets to a point where it is big and bad? When things are smaller, usually it's much easier to fix a little problem than it is to fix a big problem. So how do we notice those little problems amongst all the noise that everyone is making about the big problems? I don't know. That's something I started thinking about having read this book. I don't have an answer for this, but it's in many ways I find it very parallel to a lot of the issues in healthcare, where you want early diagnosis, early screening. I mean, just like with the different strains of malaria that Lizzie wants to be able to test for. If she had ended up in the Amerindian town where this little boy was a day earlier, if she had arrived back in the capital a day earlier, they might have been able to save his life. If they had had access to a test to find out which kind of malaria he had before they even left, they might have been able to use a radio to let somebody know, hey, we're coming, we're going to need access to this medicine. And they might have been able to meet in the middle. So there's a lot of early prevention that could happen if we knew how to make it happen, if we knew what those pieces were and how to bridge those gaps, and what those little problems are that cascade to lead to a big problem. I think we could make a huge impact if we started fixing the little things, instead of rushing to get to work every day. If we intentionally scheduled our time to take an extra 15 minutes for our commute so that we wouldn't have to rush, so that we could walk slowly and notice what's going on around us as we drive, as we walk to the BART in the Bay Area, or the metro, the bus, the ferry. Notice, are there people busking for pennies? Are there people who are begging? Are there people who are rushed and so unobservant that they don't notice that the flowers are blooming? Are people enjoying the space that they live in, or are people ignoring the space they live in? Why? Maybe that's a problem. Maybe it's not. I would assume that it would depend probably on the place and the purpose of the place. Some places I think are designed to be places where human connection is encouraged and facilitated. Maybe so one of the things that I thought was really cool in San Jose yesterday, it's summer in California. It's warm, it's hot. There's this like fountain in this little, if the fountain were turned off, it would look like a little plaza. But every few feet there's a little opening and the water just shoots straight up. And there was a whole crowd of people playing in their swimsuits, and there were kids, and everyone was laughing and having a good time and playing in this fountain that had clearly been designed for that purpose. And it was bringing people together to enjoy the place where they were living. And I think that solves a little problem, because it encourages you not just to pass through somewhere on your way to somewhere else, but to notice what's there and to appreciate it and to laugh and smile and have fun. And there's so much research that shows that laughing and smiling and having fun is good for your health. So it's little things. exactly like what Lizzie's trying to do, but also in a certain way, like in a certain way, it's like what Vanessa and her company are trying to do as well. You know, they're doing marketing in a way for various things, but marketing has a purpose too, and it can solve some of those little problems. So maybe you need a malaria test, but you don't have a way of accessing it. And maybe somebody else in a neighboring city has a whole warehouse full of malaria test equipment, but they can't find anyone to do the tests on because they don't know where they are. So the little problem is connecting those two people, right? Like, you're connecting the people who need the test and the people who have the tests, and they're close to each other. Like in Guyana, it would have taken maybe half an hour of a helicopter ride to go from the Amerindian town to the capital city, but they don't have that access. There's no equivalent to an emergency truck in helicopter format there, because they don't have the resources for it. There's not the awareness that it could be potentially life-saving. And there's not that sense of trust between the Amerindians and the healthcare providers in the right way. Certainly not in the same way that there is in the US at all. So the marketers could provide a lot of value if they're bringing in new revenue streams for the government, for the healthcare system, by bringing in tourism. That could potentially enable the healthcare system to put into place some of those emergency helicopter systems. So it starts with some little things and with creating awareness. So I think it's really clear that Jess, her background in journalism and political science really comes through in this, and I really enjoy it because in a lot of ways, I think Black River Redemption has more in common with what journalism should be, and it has a lot to do with how journalism has changed. You know, a lot of editors in newspapers and magazines and big conglomerate news agencies, they're not allowed to run stories that won't sell. If there's not something that is in every issue on the website every day that people will buy, then the company isn't making money and the editors are not allowed to let that happen. It's not in their job description, right? Like, there's this myth about the freedom of the press, and that assumes that any and all information is equally valuable. And theoretically, that's true. But in practice, there's a lot of people who, if they're not interested in what the newspaper has to tell them, stop buying that newspaper. Or they'll stop subscribing to the magazine if the magazine isn't giving them the information they want. And it costs money to run an organization that provides news, that provides information. It's not free. You have to pay the reporters, you have to pay the photographers, you have to pay for printing, or you have to pay for web hosting and distribution. And ads are often what are used to pay for that, because people expect this information to be free. At least in the US they do. So there's a lot of tension, because the organization is a business. It has to be profitable. Otherwise, it will stop bringing news at all, any kind of news. And the advertising companies really want to know what kind of person reads that particular magazine, because, you know, they don't want to tell a 10-year-old kid to go buy a car. That doesn't make any sense, right? Like, first of all, a 10-year-old kid can't buy a car, and secondly, like, they don't have the resources to, even if they were old enough to drive, which they're not. So you want to make sure that the ads that you're running match who's reading your journal, your article, your website. But you also need to make sure, if you're having advertising, that whatever it is that you're using to bring people to your site, who you're bringing people to subscribe to your newspaper, if it's in print, or your magazine, there has to be a reason for people to want to buy that magazine, that newspaper, to subscribe to that news source if it's not free. And if it is free, you want to be able to bring enough people to the site that it provides the advertiser with a return on their investment, so that you can continue having a positive relationship with your advertiser. So news, how it really is in many ways being dictated by the places that have the ability to spend a lot of money on ads. And it's unfortunate, but in many ways it's true. And so I really liked Jess's writing, because it had that element of the news that gives you the information you want in a way that lets you figure out whether it's good or bad. It gives you the information to understand all of the sides of the story. It's not telling you a story from one point of view. And I think a lot of news has become very one point of view, because they're targeting a very specific group of people so that they can get advertising. So that dimensionality, I think, in many ways is being lost. And it's not just for advertising, not just for marketing that it's being lost, but it's being lost also because of time constraints and word limit constraints. And I think in a book, you get more space to sort of take a step back and look at all of the sides of the situation and understand why people do what they do in a way that allows everyone to be seen as a human being, a real human being. Whether they're making good choices or bad choices, they're still a person. And I think a lot of the news, especially recently, if you do something bad, then you're a horrible person. And that's all anyone ever knows about you. They don't know, you know, the news reporters don't have the time, they don't have the ability to show you, oh, this person did this bad thing, but they're also a human being, and these are the reasons that they use to justify their actions. And do we agree with him or do we not agree with him? And let us, as the consumers of the news, make that judgment for ourselves. There's not a lot of that left anymore, at least not that I've seen lately. So yeah, it was good. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed getting to learn something that was based on true events, that deals with real life in a way that allows us to think beyond just this story and think about what else is going on in the world, that we're only getting one piece of the story. So I hope that inspires you to ask questions about the people you meet and the places you go, and to take a minute wherever you are to notice what's going on around you in your own town, in your own city, and see, are there little problems? What are they? Could those little problems be leading to something bigger? And could those little problems be solved in a simple, easy, straightforward way? And could you find a way of solving those little problems that inspire the people within your town, your community, your city to come together? Maybe it's an extra 30 seconds a day to add composting containers next to the recycling and the trash. Most people I know, if there's a compost container in the kitchen next to the recycling and the trash, they'll separate. But it's not actually useful. It's not widespread in many places because there's no composting system the same way that there's a trash removal system and a recycling system. There's no compost system. Could that be started by a company? Probably. I don't know. I think it would depend on the person and the community and what they were looking for. So go do awesome things and let me know what you do and let me know what you see. I would love to hear what you're up to and how Black River Redemption impacted your life and your thoughts about little problems and big problems and solving them. So the best way to do that is to join the Purple Court on my website. So go to ankc.com/join. And there's a lot in there about fiction and fantasy and exploring various worlds, various stories, excuse me. And there's a forum there. And as part of that forum, I want to discuss how literature, how fantasy, how science fiction inspires us in real life to do what we can to make the world better. So I have been very, very much inspired by Black River Redemption. So I do want to hear what your opinion is, and I look forward to seeing you there. So we have another book next week. I'm excited for it. It's sort of a different genre, so be on the lookout for something new and different that will hopefully inspire us to take action on those little problems we see. So until next time, bye.